so pleased that you're doing this and connecting us all in this way. So at the WaterFire Arts Center, we have a show of the work of Robert Rohm, who was a Rhode Island sculptor, and we're showing 50 years of work by Robert Rohm, over 100 pieces. This first one is the earliest piece in the show is from 1969. Created after he got a $1,100,000 grant for Mexico, and with these very meticulously carved sculptures that have pivot points and they move.
Can you speak louder?
Sure. And I could. And then over here this was a work of Robert Rohm's from 1969 that we recreated specially for the exhibition because this was a very important piece in his career. It was created for a very major blockbuster show at the Whitney Museum of American Art. He'd been in the Whitney maybe 3 or 4 times, but this was Marcia Tucker's first large show when she became the director, and it was a piece about conceptual art. And this piece was from '69, and it's a rope grid, and we had to recreate this piece because as a process piece or a conceptual art piece, it was made in place and then it was taken apart. And so the original was never preserved, but it had a big impact on the show and the critics. And it starts with a great big rigid grid, about 22 feet wide by 18 feet high. And it's nailed to the gallery wall. We built the wall just like it was at the Whitney, the same color, the same size. And then he introduces the randomness of gravity and the real world by pulling the nails, well, he didn't pull the nails, but he pulled the knot of the grid off the nails in 11 of the knots and then let those two balance. So it's a very playful piece. And I think there's an insight to this whole show of Robert Rohm, because he was very interested in the balance between that Cartesian rigid grid and then what nature and gravity and chaos and the rotational energy of the rope would create. But when you look at the rest of this show, you can see how balance is right at the core of what Robert Rohm is intrigued with. Here we have this almost pirouette of 2 dancing hands with 2 fingers articulated in detail in perfect balance and poise, and this sense of being able to see the structure and the grid underneath that was so central to the sculptural support of the piece, and then gradually filling out the flesh with encaustic paint. And here's another one of these rope grid pieces. This started as a very rigid, regular rectangle of 6-inch by 12-inch squares, 16 feet wide. And then the intervention here was 7 vertical cuts, and then pulling the knots off the nails at the top. And one of Robert's points is you can't really predict these pieces. As you see, here's another piece just balanced on the wall, like a dance-like figure, very energetic, engaged, full of life, and just poised there, shadows intervening on it. And if we go back over here, you'll see more of these pieces here. This is a piece, all these pieces are untitled, but then he had working titles for them. So this is Untitled Stride. And the energy of this figure, you get a sense of the body within the fabric underneath it, or the balance point ladder that's just mysteriously held up there, or this wonderful hand which was inspired by the sculptures of Buddha in Thailand, which he visited, just poised in the middle of space and balanced there in that moment. It's a beautiful piece. You get that sense of this moment in time where this hand just hangs there, or this hand here, with this gesture of sort of gracious offering, and just how it balances here. So there are many pieces here. We're going to walk across the exhibition a little bit and look at some very different pieces that he did a little later.
This isn't working, so just talk loud.
Oh, okay. Is that working? You can hear?
Yep.
Okay. This is the third rope grid we recreated for this show. This one, the intervention is 2 horizontal cuts through the grid and then pulling it off the nails, which are still there. And then there are a lot of pieces that have a more mysterious illusion. This is clearly got a religious reference here. It's called Untitled Altar. Made with encaustic, and then more of these altar-like objects. And then to your right here, this is a very imposing and sort of frightening piece. It's meant as a ritual object that one might carry through a procession. It's got these very, very sharp, sort of the energy of this sharp wire that pokes out in all directions. I just love this piece. And then Robert was very interested in the forms of boats. Here you see pieces made of wood, very simple wood, but echoing the form of the hull of a boat. And here you see again a piece looking at the forms of how boats are put together. You can see more of them over here. We'll come to those when we get to them. And also, again, these things about tension. So here's this little sort of haiku about these two huge, giant-sized stools. I mean, this is like 6 feet high. These giant-sized stools in this sense of precarious balance. Powerful, mysterious piece. Here again, we talked about balance. This is a piece where everything's in absolute tension. This is Douglas fir that's sprung just like very strong steel. There's almost 2 tons of pressure on the piece of aluminum there. And these are pieces that again deal with very mundane materials and making surprisingly powerful sculptures out of it. And then behind them here, we've got what I find a total revelation is his drawings. Just luscious, meticulous, detailed, many, many layered, fascinating drawings with curious overlays of lots of different imagery. We've got about a dozen of them in the show. They're in the collection Museum of Fine Arts. The RISD Museum has an ink drawing of his. And if we go over and look, you'll see more of the drawings. But again, these ceremonial objects that would be part of a religious procession. Again, a fascination with the structure of boats. This is called wall canoe. And it's a canoe that is built very lightly. It's sort of about 2/3 scale, but then it's hung on the wall upside down, very specifically, it's to be 12.5 inches off the floor. It's a line in the back that says this line to be 14 3/8 of an inch above the floor. And it's a sort of attention to detail that I love in his work. More of these rich drawings. These are oil pastel with additional pencil and charcoal. And if we go around here, this is called wall hull. And we have this, I think, just very powerful piece. It's got a heavy lead keel. And then the shape of the hull bursts out of the wall with an energy and a curve, and you can look behind it. It's just a very, very elegant piece. More pieces in rope. Many people just want to give a hug to this one. More drawings. This is a set of pieces where he created tables which are of a similar scale to each other with enigmatic built-in surfaces to the top of the table. And they're clearly done with a sense of humor. This is a table that sits in 4 buckets on the floor, the lead keel, and boat form for this one. This one has this very biomorphic shape. This was how he showed them in New York. He showed at OK Harris, and at OK Harris he used these lights, so we wanted to respect that. This is a piece called Untitled Meteor Window. And it's about a true story of a meteor crashing through a Palladian window, the upper frame of one of these windows in a New England house, and exploding on the floor in the kitchen, on the kitchen floor. So, again, these very simple materials: zinc sheet, roofing lead, wood, string, rope, I think this is a very powerful piece. It's got the volume of a cathedral space, but it's in negative space. It's below the table. It goes down into the earth, and then the corrosion of the lead surface gives it a wonderful, rich tapestry. These columns he started in 1999 and did many of them. There are about 20 of them here, 22 of them, I think. And they have a human-scaled height to them with this sort of skeleton of welded rebar, and then usually within it some sort of a surprise that can burst forth with sort of organic energy. And so like this one here, we have a stepped base and this rigid cage, and then a big biomorphic object full of color that doesn't seem to be attached in any way and is just trying to rise up into the air. And there's no visible support for it. It's just screaming against the stricture of the cage. You see the same sort of thing in these as well. This energy that sort of bursts forth. Let's go into the last room, and I'll show you two more really fun pieces that are part of the show. Rohm created stage sets for dances and performances, and here we have 4 of those stage elements as freestanding sculptures, and they're with very attenuated forced perspective with distortions of domestic objects. For this case, of a table and a vase and 2 chairs, a column and a ladder. Again, these sense of balance, or the wonderful poetry of this piece behind you, this Adirondack chair gazing off into the distance through the rigidities of a perspective viewpoint, but it sort of questions whether that's a valid viewpoint that's going to tell you something about the world. And in here are about 25 of these wonderful little maquettes that Rohm did to experiment with his sculptures. These were pieces that were in his studio, where just the meticulousness of the way he worked and the simple materials and just how wonderfully things reacted with light. It's just a great celebration of a very creative, inventive Rhode Island artist whose work, I think, deserves to be seen in a sense of continuity, such as this show. So, thank you very much for coming, and I hope people will come see the pieces in real time. It's up through the April 25th.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you, Barnaby. And this concludes Gallery Night, April 2021. We will be back next month with more Facebook Live tours as well as in-person tours. We're doing some walking and biking tours next month, which will be announced shortly. All right, everyone, have a great night.